Hi, welcome to our board presidency webinar series. This module is called Managing Personalities, and my name is Julie Bacon, and I am a leadership development specialist with the Arizona School Boards Association and a governing board member in the Paradise Valley Unified School District.
And my name is Nikki Whaley. I am a board support specialist with Arizona School Boards Association and a governing board member in the Washington Elementary School District. So, managing personalities. We, as board members, have seen a various degree of personalities, and we as board members ourselves have probably demonstrated at various parts of our own personalities while at the dais. And so this is really for board presidents, how do you manage all those personalities? Because you will encounter things at different times, and it may be that the person is consistently one personality, or it could be that all board members jump between them depending on the topic of what is being covered on the agenda. So, and this is really one of the hardest parts from what I understand. I've yet to be a board president myself.
It definitely is one of the hardest parts.
It's one of the hardest parts that I hear board presidents talk about is how do we manage all these different personalities? So the first one we want to talk about is the talker. So this is a board member who repeats the same thing many times during discussion, has difficulty concluding their remarks, kind of just keeps going on and on, and then maybe goes into too many different topics. So they start talking about one thing and they may wind up talking about the next thing or the next thing. You start talking about buses and then you go forward to talk about bus drivers and then you start talking about staff in general. So as a board president, how might you manage a talker? One of the things to remember is that first and foremost, all people on the board want to be heard. And so a talker may feel that they just are not having success in clarifying what it is that they want to say. So they keep talking until they feel like they've been heard. So one thing that the board president might want to do is wrap up the talker and say, you know, what I'm hearing is this, this, and this. Is there anything else you need to add? So that way they feel that they have been heard, and if there's something else that hasn't already been said, they can get to that point as opposed to continuing with the previous points.
I think the other thing is, you know, you've got to be careful with people who like to talk because, like you said, they could get off on different topics that aren't part of the agenda. So that's something that board presidents, really all board members have a duty to be thinking about and looking at, because you certainly wouldn't want to have a violation of open meeting law during your meeting in the form of someone trying to get their opinion heard.
Right. So the next personality that we're going to talk about is the silent one. So this is a board member who maybe contributes nothing, even though you know that they have things to say. They may be shy or resistant to public speaking. So this might be somebody that really doesn't like to try to fight for airtime, so they kind of hang back. Or this could be somebody that maybe just isn't great about thinking on the fly, and so they have to kind of be more prepared. So as board president, a couple of things that you could do to help coach this particular type of board member is to, first of all, make sure you make space for them. As board president, you can say, you know, I haven't heard from board member Bacon. Do you have anything that you'd like to add to this conversation? That provides a window for them that it's their floor, it's their turn to speak. And so if they were kind of waiting to see how they step in, that gives them an open invitation to share their ideas. If the person is just generally shy or resistant to public speaking, you may encourage them to draft their comments beforehand so that they can be prepared to speak when offered an opportunity to do so. Another way that the silent one might come up is somebody that you know has something to say, but they're unusually quiet. This may be because they either are unprepared or maybe are afraid of being shut down. So sometimes board members we've seen when working with them just stop participating because they feel that their voice isn't heard anyway, so they no longer say anything. And in this situation, it would be important to coach that member one-on-one and ask them where their motivation is. Hey, I noticed you usually have a lot to say, but you haven't been saying anything recently, and trying to get to the bottom of that.
Right. And I think that this board member, for me, is sad because I think sometimes they have so much to offer, but don't have the confidence to offer it. So whatever you can do as board president to build that confidence in the person, I think is a really important part of the job. The next one is that broken record. The person who says the same thing over and over They believe if they say it enough, people will either agree with them or they will change their minds. And this is someone who, like Nikki said, with the silent one, this could be someone who's not feeling heard. So they have to say it over and over and over again to just reinforce what it is that they'd like to get across. And this one can be hard. I think some of the strategies that I've utilized in the past is, is there anything else you'd like to add that you haven't already said? Or let's let other board members contribute, and then we can come back to you if they haven't added anything new to the conversation, if you have other things to add. So just trying to get the conversation away from that person so that the topic that they're, kind of fixated on is switched. Just kind of switch the conversation.
Another strategy is to repeat back to them what you've heard.
Yes.
So just letting them know, Board Member Whaley, I hear that you disagree with this topic for these reasons. And that kind of says yes. They can say yes or no, and then they know that they have been heard. Another way to deal with this is to put it back before the board, remembering that we all are just one of 5. If there is a board member that wants to keep bringing up the same topic, or if it's a board member that just won't let a topic go in a specific meeting, you can always bring it back to the board and say, is it as an agenda item, is this something that we want to spend time on? And if at that point the board says, no, we don't, a majority of the board says that, then you will be able to move on and let them know that I'm sorry, but this is just not something the majority of the board wants to put energy behind. At least they get their time to speak their mind. Not putting it on the agenda at all or avoiding the conversation completely is not going to help your broken record.
No, they're just going to be more broken and keep talking. So the next one we want to talk about is the Maverick. This is the watchdog or the agitator, the person who likes to stir the pot. Typically is loved by the media and sometimes by the audience, depending on the audience and depending on the Maverick. But they also have this mission to correct a perceived wrong on the board or the district. My experience has been that this is kind of like the person who throws the first bomb. They want shock and awe. That's what they're interested in. And so it's up to the board president to ask them to define that, the bomb that they just dropped and what that really means. Because often when you drop something unexpected, it's not very well thought out in terms of other people understanding what it is that you mean when you do it.
I think also with Mavericks, and again, this can be their general way that they behave in the board, or it could just be around a particular issue. But the idea is that they're different. They're a part of the crowd. They want to make it clear that they are standing for something that's different or separate from maybe what's been brought forth before. So I think acknowledging is probably the key throughout this particular section, is acknowledging them so that they can say, thank you so much for bringing that other perspective. We understand that you are very strongly passionate about X, Y, or Z. And so that gives them the separation that they want, but at the same time, working to bring them within the fold. And so that means maybe talking with your Maverick ahead of time in a board meeting. If there are things that you know that this person particularly cares about, asking them ahead of a meeting, hey, did you get a chance to look at the agenda? Are there any particular questions that you have? They may or may not take you up on it, but they may share some things, some insights with you so that you can maybe head off as board president some of those conversations, or at least frame the conversation in a more productive way.
Right.
So the next person we're going to talk about is the know-it-all. And Julie and I kind of tease each other. I think we've both been in this role a lot, and that's just the when you get into that space where you have some expertise, you get really excited to be participants in the conversation. And so this board member is someone that might use either their professional background or their age or their years of service in order to reinforce what they're saying. So they may need to validate themselves and their expertise in order to before they present their information, because they really want it to be heard. They really want it to be acknowledged and respected. So this is a board member that might say, well, I've been on the board for 17 years and this is how we do this. Or it might be somebody that I used to be a teacher, or I used to be a principal, and this is how this is. One of the ways that you can address this is by acknowledging their expertise and also maximizing it. So for example, if you have somebody that's been a teacher in the past, you can acknowledge, I know as your experience as a school teacher, this is something that you've experienced. Thank you for sharing that perspective. Now let's go to somebody that maybe isn't a teacher. How would you see that from the outside? Because it's important for the know-it-all to understand that other perspectives are valued, and that just because you have an expertise in the area, that there's many people that don't have expertise, that may have questions that need to be heard and addressed in order to move forward.
And that's the beauty of a locally elected governing board. The diversity of opinion and diversity of expertise really is what makes governing boards unique and effective. So it is hard, excuse me, when the know-it-all wants to tell you everything. And you know, often I think both Nikki and I come from a social work perspective, and often the know-it-all is someone who needs that validation all the time. So providing that to them and acknowledging their expertise while also recognizing that everyone has something to contribute would be a really effective technique.
So the next personality is the interrupter. So again, this is something I know I've been guilty of, but the board member who starts talking before another board member finishes. They may not be trying to be rude, but they come across that way, or maybe they don't allow other members to participate. What I've seen in group settings is that the interrupter is generally very passionate about what it is that they're saying, and they're really engaged in the conversation. And they may not even know that they are interrupting or being rude. So like all of these personality types, assuming positive intent, there is a positive intent behind how they're behaving, but they're not always aware of the negative, potentially unintentional consequences of that. So with an interrupter, there's a couple things that you can do from the dais. From the dais, you can, as board president, say, you know, board member Bacon wasn't finished with that thought. Let's finish up with Ms. Bacon, and then we'll hear from Ms. Whaley. So that you can make sure that you're respecting each member's time. Another thing that you can do with an interrupter is I don't know, what's another thing?
Another thing, well, I just want to say this. I know my family, if they were listening to this, would say I'm a total interrupter at home. I hope I don't do it so much at board meetings, but I know that I have done it at board meetings. And I think part of, you know, we talk frequently about the difference between hearing and listening. And you can hear people, that's the mechanics, but listening is really that science of hearing what they're saying, getting their meaning, understanding where they're coming from. And often as human beings, we don't do that well enough. We don't listen to understand, we listen to respond. And those are two totally different things. And so we would just encourage you to listen to understand before you respond. And if you have someone on the board who is an interrupter and is doing those things, it is helpful for the board president to guide that conversation, but really any member of the board can do that. And I think what Nikki said earlier is just, you know, recognizing that this person didn't finish what they were trying to say. That also might require the board president to interrupt the interrupter, but that way there could be some good practice and some good standards set for the way your board has discussions.
And for those of you that record your meetings, you'd be able to go back and demonstrate that. You may encourage your board member, you know what, I just want to bring this to your attention because I think it's coming across, but I don't know if you've noticed you interrupt, or you tend to interrupt people when you get excited. Maybe you want to look at our last board meeting and you can look through what I'm talking about. That is a valuable tool, and I think you'll find that many people do this. Another thing that a board president can do is set a precedent for acknowledging speakers before it's their turn to speak. So for example, asking the board president or raising your hand when you have something to say and the board president acknowledges whose turn it is to speak.
Right, I think that's really important as well. Okay, the next person is the nonverbal communicator. This is the one who uses that nonverbal communication to get their point across, whether they're nodding their head in agreement or nodding in disagreement, rolling their eyes, turning their back, or demonstrates what they feel without using words. And anyone who's been a parent to a teenager knows what this looks like. It's very clear, and we all do it. I don't think there's probably one of us that's innocent of this trait. So that's something to really think about as board president. When you see those things happening, you can say, Ms. Whaley, it looks like you agree with what Ms. Smith said. And then you can kind of get conversation going. And sometimes people might not want to be called out about their nonverbal communication, but I think it's a good lesson for people to learn that everyone can see what you're thinking, even though you're not saying anything. And sometimes people don't even realize they're doing it. So it might be helpful for that person, for the board president, to address it as needed.
And again, this is something that could take practice too, because it's going to depend on what the situation is. When you're at the dais, people can see things that you may not normally be able to see if you're over the phone. And your community that might be there, whether it's 3 people or a room full of people, can see that as well. So how you come across in that setting tells the community a lot about how the board is operating. And so as much as you can as a board president to get people to verbalize any potential nonverbal cues that they are doing is beneficial. And again, doing some self-work, that this is a particular problem and in your district, doing some professional development or doing some awareness exercises about practicing how to do that might be helpful as well.
Right. So we hope that this helped in terms of the board president managing the personalities that are on a board. There certainly are a lot of them. So we didn't cover everything, but these were a few that have come up over a period of time and over the years. So we wanted to just provide some information around that. Thank you so much for joining us for this board presidency webinar series, and hope you're having a good year.